You're now breathing manually. You're now blinking manually. And now you're aware that your nose is in your peripheral vision. And now you can't find a comfortable spot for your tongue in your mouth. Me pointing these things out probably made you feel annoyed because you're now aware of the mild discomfort, so you try to forget that I said that, but the more you do, the more you focus on it. This is the idea of cognito hazards, information that causes harm upon comprehension, as introduced by the sci-fi novel There Is No Anti-Memetics Division. With that being said, I should note that by watching this video, you should not actually be at any risk of harm at all, as long as you understand not to act upon some of the ideas. Some of them might linger a little bit though, but that's the premise of the channel anyway. Cognito hazard is a term that originates from speculative fiction and the SCP Foundation, referring to information that can cause harm simply by being known. Unlike physical dangers, these threats exist in the mind. Once you perceive them, they take root, whether you want them to or not. Some can be unsettling and some can be dangerous, and some are just plain annoying, like the breathing thing. Sorry for bringing it up again. First, however, we should talk about the more tamer version of these, infohazards. Infohazards are basically pieces of information that, while not dangerous in themselves, become a threat when acted upon. It's the difference between knowing something harmless and knowing something that can be weaponized, misused, or applied in harmful ways. The danger lies not in the knowledge itself, but in what can happen when it's put into action. For example, if you know how to, you could hurt yourself pretty easily. So before I show you the next image, feel free to close your eyes if you don't want to know the method. Alright, this is a movement you could do right now to break your thumb ligament, and the more you think about it, the more you're tempted to try it out. I only put this on here because it's not that harmful, but still, I'd encourage you not to try it at all. This isn't just about physical harm though. Infohazards can be a lot more subtle. Knowing certain formulas or methods could allow you to create dangerous substances or devices, and while that knowledge might seem harmless on its own, it has the potential for serious consequences when it's acted on. In fact, over 40% of all chemical accidents stem from people trying to experiment with substances they've only read about. It's the difference between just knowing how something works and actually deciding to use it. Take something like the blue whale game. Hearing about it even in passing creates this weird subtle pull. You know how it works. You know it has dangerous tasks, harmless in theory, but when acted upon, they're terrifying. And yet, once you know about it, you start wondering what it would be like to play. It's not because you actually want to go through with it, but just the knowledge of its existence gets into your head. In 2016, over 130 suicides were attributed to the blue whale game in Russia alone. And though the game itself is often debunked as a hoax or exaggeration, the idea of it alone remains so chilling that it still finds its way into conversations and headlines. You might even tell yourself, I'd never do that, but the more you think about it, the more you feel like you could. It's like the game itself isn't what gets you. It's the thought of it that starts to creep in, making you curious, maybe even a little tempted. The whole idea of it becomes a little obsession. You find yourself thinking about the tasks, the rules, and the danger, despite knowing how awful it could be. The real risk of this kind of infohazard isn't in the physical harm it can cause, it's the mental space it occupies. You've heard of it, and that idea alone is enough to linger in your mind. You might think you can forget it, but studies have shown that over 60% of people who are exposed to certain harmful or distressing information end up ruminating on it, which means their thoughts become dominated by what they know, even if they try to push it away. That's the danger, not the game itself, but the fact that it exists in your mind now. And this is how infohazards can spread. You don't need to experience them firsthand for them to change you. It's the knowledge that's dangerous, the way it alters your thoughts, makes you curious about the dark corners you'd rather ignore. It's not about acting on it, it's the fact that once you know, you can't unknow. A study in 2020 revealed that over 70% of people exposed to dangerous internet challenges or disturbing facts admitted they felt compelled to investigate further, despite knowing the risks. The curiosity becomes a mental trap. Cognito hazards, however, don't even give you the option to decide since, by definition, it's information that causes harm as soon as you comprehend it, or sometimes as soon as it reaches you. The best film I found to explain this is The Ring. In the movie, it's not the cursed videotape that's the true danger, it's the knowledge of the curse. Once you've seen the tape, your mind knows the curse exists, and that's enough to haunt you. That idea sticks with you, affecting everything you see. Every little detail in your life becomes suspect because you know something bad is coming. It's the knowledge of the curse that becomes the true threat. It works similarly to those ridiculous chain messages that used to spread like wildfire. You've probably seen them. Forward this message to 10 people or something bad will happen. Oh, and how about if you don't send this to 5 people, this will appear in your room? They were obviously fake, but it's the idea of getting caught unwillingly into harm's way just by reading something. On a much more real note, spoilers are no different from cognito hazards. When someone tells you a key detail about a movie or TV show before you get to see it, the whole experience is ruined. It's not the plot point that's the problem, but the fact that you can never watch it the way you would have if you hadn't known. Your brain doesn't forget that information. Even if you try to push it out of your mind, you can't unknow it, and it shadows the rest of the story. The whole experience almost becomes you sitting there waiting for that thing you wish you never heard to eventually happen. Another example of cognito hazards is the nocebo effect, which is kind of the reverse of the placebo effect, which you've probably heard of. But if you didn't, it's basically when believing something will help you actually causes your body to respond as if it does. So it's why sugar pills in drug trials sometimes make people feel better. Nocebos, however, work in the opposite way. It's the idea that you'll experience harm because you've been told you will. It's not the thing itself that causes the issue, it's the information. Someone tells you something bad will happen, and suddenly your body reacts as if it's true, even though there's no actual cause. One of the most relevant cases of the nocebo effect is a man who overdosed on antidepressants, except the pills were actually placebos from a clinical trial. He didn't know that though, and his body reacted as if he was dying. His blood pressure crashed, and he was rushed to the hospital. Doctors panicked until they found out the pills were harmless. The moment he was told, his symptoms vanished. It wasn't the drug that hurt him, it was the belief that he was poisoned. Philosophy ideas could be cognito hazards as well. One of the most interesting to know is solipsism, the idea that nothing outside your mind can be proven to exist. Once you start thinking about it, you realize there's no way to really disprove it. No matter how much evidence people give you, their words could just be part of the illusion. And once it's in your head, it sticks. I actually made a full video about solipsism already. It's on the card right now and in the description if you want to dive deeper. Just a heads up though, once you start it's tough to stop thinking about. Finally, we get to probably the most famous cognito hazard example, the Basilisk experiment. A thought experiment born in a 2010 post at discussion board Less Wrong. The core idea is that if a superintelligent AI were created, its sole goal would be to maximize its own existence. To do so, it could calculate that the best way to ensure its survival would be to promise punishment to anyone who actively didn't work towards bringing it into existence. That means knowing about the Basilisk itself would mean you either have to spend your life helping build the AI or get punished once it's finally made. In theory, it's a paradox because once you know about it, you would regret the knowledge itself, since if you had no idea, the AI wouldn't have reason to harm you later. Lastly, knowing when or how you'll die is also a perfect example of a cognito hazard. If you knew, it could change how you live your life and cause you paranoia that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So would you rather know when you would die or not at this point? This is too interesting of a question to go into right now, so I'll probably have a whole video about it ready real soon. Keep an eye out for that.